My name is Irving Epstein, but everybody calls me Irv. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1927. My parents, I guess that's the place to start. My father came from Pechanikov, which was a shtetl near north of Berdichev, then Russia, now Ukraine. My mother came from Kiev, then Russia, and now Ukraine. My father left Russia in 1911, primarily mistreatment by the Cossacks. His family came to Council Bluffs and then to Omaha. My mother left Russia in 1921, primarily because of the Bolsheviks. Her family had money, and they suffered during the revolution. My mother came with an aunt and eventually came to Omaha. My father was in the U.S. Army during World War I. Met my mother after she had come here. We were married in 1924 at the home of my Uncle Sam, who then had a house at 22nd in California, which then was a nice Jewish neighborhood once upon a time. They had their financial difficulties, as everybody did in those days. I was born, as I said, in 1927. I was born at the Methodist Hospital, which then was at about 38th and Cumming Street. And I remember my mother complained because she was in the hospital for 10 days to deliver a child. My father had a little confectionery next to the Roseland Theater at 24th and O Streets. And the theater was owned by my uncles. And the confectionery next door served ice cream and other small items. In later years, he added a small restaurant there. Basically, that's where I grew up. I am an only child. I went to grade school at Hawthorne School, which then was at 18th and Missouri Avenue. And then I went to South High School. In South High, I was a captain in the ROTC, and I was on the debate team. And because being on the debate team, I was able to move around and meet other people from other schools. But we were rather cloistered. We never owned a house. We never owned a car. So everybody was pretty much where they were located. After that, I had a scholarship to go to the University of Nebraska. I'm going back to my school days now. When I was in grade school, I remember the other Jewish students in my grade school. My cousin Dave was in my grade school, and there was a Rosalie Flatterman, whose father at that time had Allen Furniture on South 24th Street. And that was pretty much the grade school. Once I got to high school, there were 5 Jewish boys in my class. And we all became achievers of a sort. I'll talk about our 5. And Cousin Dave was in and out of our little group, and he left early to go into the Coast Guard. It was during World War II. In my class was Art Harris. His parents had a fashion shop and beauty parlor on South 24th Street. Art was a very good artist and went to work for Rubicon and Young in New York and became an advertising director, and he was there at the infancy of television, so he got into commercial television very good. Herb Singer went to a different grade school. Herb was in high school with me, and Herb went to Nebraska Medical School and then moved to California and was a very successful practitioner. He had a specialty of, Herb became a proctologist and went into the Navy, and whereupon he was known as the Rear Admiral. He had a cousin, Milton Maisel, and Milton went to dental school in Lincoln, Nebraska, and went to California. Also, Dick Rosinski was in our group. He was a brother to Ruth Rosinski, and he became a retailer in different businesses. At this point, only Herb Singer and I are alive out of our little group. I'm now 90 years old, and Herb is 90. In high school, and in those years, it was during the war years. Before that, there was a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism, and I grew up in an area that was primarily at that time Catholic, and the parishes were all pretty much formed in their mother countries, and the priest spoke in the language of his parish, which usually be Polish or Bohemian or whatever, and their mass was in Latin, so they didn't have any English at all, but they all learned anti-Semitic items, and so we suffered from that, called names and so forth, but we kind of grew up in that. I was always in a hurry, and so after high school, I went to the University of Nebraska for 1 year on a Regent Scholarship, and there I was on the varsity debate team. My partner then was Ted Sorensen, who later became a speechwriter for President John F. Kennedy. And we had various activities on the campus then of, for example, of an early version of the United Nations. And because we were a small house, I was in the ZBT fraternity there. We had a small house. We were allied with different sororities, and I became a representative of the United States at our mock United Nations. I then went to Creighton University, and at that time World War II was over, and the schools were working on an accelerated schedule, and the law school was running 3 semesters to a year. I graduated from law school at the age of, in the year of 1948, and I was 21 years of age. So I thought I was hot stuff. I was the youngest lawyer in Nebraska, and I went out looking for work. And I went to the banks and the insurance companies and the utilities and all the institutions. And I barely got interviews because I learned very quickly that they didn't hire Jews. I then went to all the law firms, and at that time there was only one Jewish boy in Omaha who worked for a Gentile law firm, and that was Leo Eisenstadt. And you know, I learned right then, you know, there's another world out there, and the business world was quite different. I did go to work for Fred White and Lou Lip and White and Lip, and another associate in the office was Ray Simon, and Ray later became a partner, so it was known as White, Lip, and Simon. I left there after 3 years because I was finally up to $100 a month. It's hard to imagine those days, those times. In the meantime, I married Jerry Marks. Jerry's father was transferred to Omaha, where he worked for a millinery syndicate. All of our worlds have changed so much. But Jerry on a blind date, and within a year we were married. She worked at Northwestern Bell Telephone Company as a service representative, and she was making $200 a month, so we got by very nicely. After I left White Lip, I went to work for Irvin Levine, and Irvin Levine had a very large practice. He represented a number of Jewish businessmen and the bookies. So I got a new education with the bookies. While I was in law school, I joined the reserves, and I was in the Army Reserves, and I had a friend at about that time who was in the same Army Reserve unit as I, and he got switched to the Air Force JAG. And he had some strong political connections. But I thought, well, I'll try it. And I filed the paperwork for the Air Force JAG, and then suddenly I get 2 sets of orders in the mail on the same day. One from the Army, sending me to Fort Benning, Georgia to be trained as a platoon leader, and one from the Air Force appointing me to the Judge Advocate Corps. And I then went down to 5th Army Headquarters, which then was at 15th and Dodge Streets, and showed them my 2 sets of orders, and I said, where do I go? And they finally determined that the earliest postmark would control. And that's how I got into the Air Force. And now we were in Korea, and I was ordered to go to Portland, Oregon, to join the 403rd Troop Carrier Wing. But on my way out of Omaha, Herb Levine tells me that the boys had taken care of me and I should stop in Las Vegas on my way to Portland because it was on the way. Sometimes those connections meant something, and we did go by way of Las Vegas. After Portland, I served in different places in the United States, did all kinds of JAG work and some intelligence work. Okay, I was talking about Air Force, where I had done intelligence work and had done some different traveling. I came back to Omaha, went back to work for Irvin Levine, and there was a vacancy in the Omaha City Attorney's Office. And so I took an exam for that, and I then went to work as an assistant city attorney, and a few years later I became the deputy city attorney, which made me number 2. While working for the city, I established the Airport Authority, had to lobby a bill through the legislature to make that an independent authority. I had tried all of the condemnation cases for the city, where the city was taking real estate property, and I did represent the planning board, so I was doing the zoning code. As a result, later on, I was well versed in real estate. I served in that office for about 6 years. Then I made a connection with a former member of the city attorney's staff, a Swede by the name of Einar Vereen. And Einar and I became partners, and we were together for probably over 25 years. And Einar and I came from different backgrounds. He came from Holdridge, Nebraska, served in the Navy during World War II. He was friends with Richard Nixon, and as a result, we got a telephone call one day after Nixon was elected president, and we were offered the FHA offices for the state of Nebraska, but Einar wanted to go to Panama, and so he said, could he become a commissioner on the Panama Canal Commission? There went our FHA, and I knew how to split the fees on FHA, but I did not know how to split fees for Einar going to Panama, but we had those connections. And because of Einar being well versed with the Republican Party at that time, I would get calls from time to time from the East. And when they were looking for votes in the U.S. Senate, I'd get a call because Einer was friendly with Senator Roman Ruska. And Einer could go to Roman and make a pitch for a Jewish cause. And so we were in and out of those things. Kind of interesting what happens. I continued in the law, doing primarily corporate and real estate work. Later, our firm merged with Gross & Welch, a large firm in Omaha, and my daughter Cynthia joined us. Cynthia graduated from Nebraska Law School and then spent a year at Boston University School of Law to get a master's in taxation. And we stayed at Gross & Welch for about 3 years, and then Cynthia and I left on our own, and we're still practicing together. I'm 90 years old, and I still go to work every day. My children, we had 3 children. Leslie, my daughter, lives in Omaha. She's a psychology consultant. My daughter, Cynthia, graduated from law school, graduated from University of Texas. Leslie had graduated from the University of Nebraska and got a master's at University of Kansas in psychology. My son, Barry, graduated from Nebraska Medical School after graduating from Northwestern University, and he went to Johns Hopkins University, where he was trained as a radiation oncologist, and he had written articles. And then Barry went to Fox Chase Cancer Institute, which is part of University of Pennsylvania, and was in charge of residents, and further studied in his radiation oncology. And he was quite well-versed, wrote articles, participated in book writing. And then at age 37, Barry, we lost Barry. Died of a heart attack. He had not been married. So, that was one of the things in life that some things just don't go the way they're supposed to go. My daughter Cynthia, who works with me, has 2 boys, and her oldest son, Harrison, is graduated from Washington University in St. Louis, and he is now in his 4th year of a PhD program in physics at the University of Minnesota. Cynthia's youngest boy, Matthew, graduated last year from the University of Michigan, and he now works for IBM. Matthew now works as a cognitive software engineer for IBM in Yorktown Heights, New York, and he's working where Watson is located. And so he's on the cusp of doing good things. My wife, Jerry. We had a lovely life together. Jerry passed away a couple of years ago, but when Barry was a senior in high school, Jerry decided to go into business. And she had been an artist and took classes from different people in Omaha in painting and so forth. And she decided to open an art gallery. And she started, had a small gallery in what they called Liberty Square in Westroads. But I took my father to show him the gallery. And my father says, what are you doing in a cellar? And I says, Papa, this is not a cellar. This is Liberty Square. And he says, it's a cellar. And he was right. She did great business for 1 year, and then after that, it was a cellar. So Jerry then left, and she moved to 72nd and Cass, and she opened up what she called Jerry's Arts and Sculpture. And Jerry did a very nice job in selling art, and when she would go to New York on buying shows, everybody knew her because of the Jewish lady from the hinterlands. And how could a Jewish lady in the hinterlands sell good art? But so they all knew her through that. And those experiences, because I would go to art shows with her, and it was a time where different creative people, every year certain ones would die. And we did not realize at that time, but this was the beginning of the HIV. And so many of the gay community were in the arts and so forth. So we saw that happening. Cynthia and I practiced law together, and we are now doing primarily estate work and transactional work, business dealings, and that's primarily what we do. Try to do sophisticated planning of sorts. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for me, I've outlived so many of my contemporaries, and so I'm into different generations of who I'm working with, but life goes on. I do go to the B'nai B'rith luncheon every Wednesday, or try to go to see who's around and do a little kibitzing, and do keep up my contacts. I try to be active. I do have a swimming pool at home, and so I'm in it as much as I can, and so I try to keep fit that way. I've had a very good life. I grew up in South Omaha, and we had a Jewish community. South 24th Street, probably half of the businesses on 24th Street in those days, South 24th Street, were Jewish owned. And we had a synagogue at 25th and J Streets. And the synagogue was small, but for the high holidays, we always had a good crowd. It was another time where it was almost impossible to collect dues coming out of the Depression. And so at the synagogue, aliyahs were auctioned off. And I remember, people auctioning off, an aliyah. I have $2 in Brighton Mall. I have $2, and so on. And everything was auctioned off, and that's how they raised their money. I was bar mitzvahed at that synagogue, and as the years went on, they would bring in somebody from out of town, a chazan from out of town for the high holidays. But in my high school and college years, I would give the sermons because there was no one else to do it, and so I had that connection. I was active in B'nai B'rith as a young man. We would have various affairs, and I would be active in that. I was married at the synagogue at 18th and Chicago Streets, which later became Beth Israel. And I would say I've belonged to Beth Israel since my marriage, but I would say that Max Fromkin was an attorney, and he had done the legal work for the synagogue. And I want to say that Max probably passed away probably 50 years ago, but upon his death, I became the attorney for Beth Israel Synagogue. And I still am, and I still do the work, whatever legal work is required, I do for Beth Israel. Also along the way, I encountered Rabbi Mendel Katzman, and I would say since Mendel has been in Omaha, I have been the free attorney for Chabad, and continue to be active, as active as I can be on behalf of Chabad. So I've kept those type of connections and that type of involvement, and it's been a pleasure to be part of all that. And we see people come and go, issues come and go, but everybody just kind of keeps rolling along, I go back to my law school days. And I'm now talking about Creighton University School of Law in 1946. We were on an accelerated schedule, and part of the education process was doing briefs, and there was heavy assignments. So how do you get all the assignments done? Well, we formed a little group, and it was called B, C, D, E, F. B was John Basarich. I don't know how he hooked up with us, but Basarich. And then C was Paul Krauts. D was Norman Denenberg. E was Irv Epstein. And F was Bob Frumpkin. And everything we did in 5 copies, and we kept track of how we did things by going alphabetically, B, C, D, E, F. And we went through law school doing that. And so, that's another interesting twist. Of that group, Norman Denenberg and I are the only ones that are left. And but that was a happy time in law school. Pressure, fast, but happy time. Jerry and I were fortunate because we liked to travel, and we'd have excuses to travel. And I went through a period where life was kind of a pressure cooker, and things were a little different maybe 30 years ago. But I'd come home and I'd say, I've had a terrible week. Let's call up one of the airlines and see what's available. And all of a sudden I'd be in Athens for 4 days, or I'd be in Copenhagen for 4 days. And those were things you could do. You could call an airline and they had 3-4 day specials, and off you'd go. But we traveled. We went to China. We did the Near East. We did various travels in Europe. One time Jerry and I decided to go to Italy, and we would do everything on our own. No reservations. We got there with our pull luggage, got off the plane in Rome, crossed the street, and got on a train to go to downtown Rome, and found a hotel. And then I went to American Express, made arrangements to go to travel through Italy and go to see the art centers, and eventually go to Venice, which was marvelous. But we did all that on our own, no reservations, and we got by. So that was fun. But we did a lot of traveling, and fortunate for that. And I would go on her art buying trips, which would be fun, and I'd be the assistant buyer, and be at affairs, and meet different people in the art world. So that was pleasant. Jerry operated her art gallery from, I'd say, 1977 to 1997, thereabouts, for about 20 years. And she was engaged in finding art for the Blumkin home, and sold some pieces and gave some pieces. And then there's a particular piece of art, and I hate to admit I cannot remember the name of the artist now, that she gave to the home. But when Ben Gurion came to Washington to meet with Jimmy Carter, he gave Jimmy Carter a suite of paintings from this particular Israeli artist, and Jerry was able to get one of those pictures and donated that to the home. So kind of a small world when we start talking about what hangs where and the connections. I would like to say that my children and my grandchildren have been the greatest blessings of all. First, I have to say, I loved Jerry. We had a beautiful life together, and I miss her every day. My children have been a pleasure and an inspiration, and I know they've always been kind to me and loving to me, and treated me first. My grandchildren I am so proud of. They've accomplished, and they're loving to their parents, and I'm just very happy. life, we have our bumps, where I lost Barry, and I lost Jerry, but the time we had together was marvelous. And I miss him very much, and I'm just glad that I've had the life I had. Thank you.